asking questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am sitting here amused because many of your questions were similar to the ones that I had written out. And as so often happens, while people back home think that Republicans and Democrats can't get along or that everything's a fight, this is not one where there's a fight, and those doses are important. And in fact, the director of NIH, Francis Collins, remarked how amazing it was that with pre-contracting and making sure that we had contracts in place as those emergency use authorizations came in play is why we were able to get vaccines out there and why we have so many doses that you went through each one of the companies on. One of the things that I'm really excited about in many ways, and it does depend on the EUA coming through for some of these other vaccines besides Pfizer and Moderna. But it appears, based on the numbers that you went through, Madam Chair, it appears that by midsummer, we may actually have a surplus of vaccine because it doesn't last forever. You can't just leave it on the shelf. And while we will probably need additional doses for the following year, because most scientists believe that we'll need a second, that it's going to be like the flu. You have to take the vaccine fairly regularly. We may actually have enough vaccine, again, assuming that we have the EUA, the emergency use authorizations from the FDA, and that they feel the other vaccines are safe. But by July, we may have enough that we have a surplus in the United States because there are only about 260 million people who are vaccine eligible. And I was just wondering if our witnesses could tell us, is it a plausible scenario that we'll have a surplus and that we'll be able to share that with other countries who aren't as fortunate as the United States? And if each of you could answer that, I'd appreciate it. Do you think that's plausible? Do you think that scenario is plausible?
Thank you for the question. I do think that there will come a point, in the second quarter of this year where I think the companies that you've heard from today are likely to be in a position to be able to supply significant doses of vaccine to the United States. And we certainly hope that we're going to be in a position where every eligible adult will be able to receive vaccination. So that scenario is entirely plausible. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I would just add to that I agree. That's the hope, is that we definitely have a surplus of vaccines, and then obviously we want to find a place to make that available to other countries that don't have access to them. We are on our side just focused on making sure we deliver the 300 million doses we're under obligation to. We're going to work 24/7 to deliver on that commitment.
And we appreciate that. Next.
I would say much the same.
Yeah.
On behalf of J&J, yes, we're extremely focused on delivering that 100 million doses by the end of June. And if the emergency use authorization is received this week, we hope to contribute to ending this pandemic as soon as possible. Yes.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Like the other witnesses, I truly hope and believe that there will be a surplus if everyone is able to deliver. And equally, I also hope that we can make those doses available to other parts of the world, including the COVAX facility. There's a huge need in order to vaccinate people also in the low and middle income countries. So it's a clear pledge to the US government as well as to the other companies here today in order to also to make sure that those people are getting vaccinated sooner than later.
At Novavax, we've got a global supply infrastructure that is important to us and to equitable access. We're intending to make sure that our US supply and manufacturing facilities are maximizing capacity out of those facilities, and it certainly is very plausible that there'll be excess capacity that we would expect and hope would be distributed around the globe where it's needed.
And we want to make sure that Americans are taken care of in this process first, but we also want to share with other countries because that helps to keep the virus from coming back or to having more mutations. That being said, we do have children under 16 years of age that are not currently eligible to get the vaccines. If you all could briefly just tell me if you're working on research. I know Pfizer told me they were in an earlier conversation, and I'm running out of time. So if you just say, yeah, we're working on something for children under 16 and maybe even under 12.
Yes, we are.
We're planning a trial in less than 16 in the spring.
At Johnson & Johnson, we have a track record of using our adenovirus-based platform in children and infants, and we'll look to leverage it for the coronavirus vaccine. We're in discussions with the FDA on how to move forward.
From AstraZeneca's perspective, yes, we have already started the pediatric trial in the UK, and we will also start a trial in the United States. So the answer is yes.
And let me say, Madam Chair, before I close out, if you bear with me just a second, the reason I think that's so important is that plagues in the past and pandemics in the past have indicated while they may not affect children the first time around, sometimes there's a mutation that comes back around that then affects children in ways that we hadn't originally expected. So I'm glad that we're preparing for that so we're not caught unawares. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Good point. Thank you. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the full